I heard a preacher once say that he was going to preach on fasting, and one of the men in his church came up to him and said, "The thought of fasting just simply terrifies me. It terrifies me. If you tell me that I will have no money, I think I can survive. If you tell me that I have to sleep on a bare hardwood floor for the next 6 months, I think I can survive that. No problem. I can do that. But if you tell me that I won't have anything to eat for the next 24 hours, sheer panic." And that's what we are afraid of, stepping into that fast. And even more, when we think about fasting, we think, well, yeah, that's not something for me to do. It's something for the super spiritual to do. We assume that such a discipline, such a spiritual discipline, is for monks or only for people who are in the Bible like Moses, or people who wrote the Bible like Paul. Fasting, that has to be for Jesus, not me, because I'm a normal person. I'm a normal person trying to follow Jesus with a normal job and a normal life. Why should I have to fast? So to bring up the idea of fasting, the idea of giving up food, well, it seems like too big of an ask for your average, everyday Christian. Let's just be honest. It seems like a big ask. It does for me, at least. And I'll be honest, of all the disciplines that there are, in some ways, this one, fasting, is the most difficult because it requires a level of self-denial that is just beyond many of us. But here's the definition. Fasting is voluntarily going without food or any regularly enjoyed good gift from God for the sake of God and our relationship with Him. Christian fasting is not just about the food. At its heart, fasting is reminding us, those of us who are forging a lifelong reliance on God, it's reminding us of our longing for that nourishment. It's reminding us of our homesickness for God. You see, some of us have forgotten how much we need and miss and want to be with God. How? Well, here's what I think. The greatest enemy of hunger for God is not poison, but apple pie. Right? The greatest enemy of hunger, our desire, our gut reaction for God is not a poison into our system, but it's simply apple pie. Let me explain. I think sometimes we think that sometimes that as long as we're not doing the big things, like one of the big 10, right, that's the 10 Commandments. If we're not doing something like that, then we're okay. Right? If we're not murdering someone, I'm a pretty good person. Right? But the truth is, it's not always the XXX rated video that takes us away from God. Sometimes it is the endless scrolling on our social media that dulls us to the feast at God's table. To that longing, to that hunger that we might have. In Luke chapter 14, Jesus lists some of the things that can distract us from his language, the banquet of God, that can distract us from our homesickness for the banquet, that can take us away from the nourishment that we just downright need and desire and want. The nourishment that our body is craving. The greatest adversary to the love that God has for us, that longing, that nourishment, that homesickness to be fulfilled, it's not enemies, it's not the world, it's not the culture, it's not any of that stuff that we like to say, right? The greatest enemy is sometimes gifts. Good gifts. Right? And the most deadly appetites are not for the poison of evil, but for the simple pleasures of earth. That's what Jesus is saying in Luke chapter 14. And when these simple pleasures of earth replace an appetite for God Himself, get this, the idolatry is scarcely recognizable. And it's almost incurable. and we're screwed unless we fast. All of us, you and me, the regular, everyday followers of Jesus. And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. So let's not skip over the very first words there. Right? It says what? And when you fast. And when you fast. It does not say if you fast. It doesn't say at the moments when you feel like fasting. It doesn't say when your leaders fast. It says when you fast. Jesus, our King, King Jesus, the God that we forge our life on, 100% expected his followers to fast. As much as he expected us to pray, as much as he expects us to give, he expects us to fast. So much so that he included these instructions in his longest message to his followers, on his great Sermon on the Mount. But Jesus says to fast in a different way, with a different heart. And it's not that he is saying hide in a closet the whole time that you're fasting. There are ways to fast in public and not be a hypocrite. Just because someone notices you skipping lunch doesn't mean that you are suddenly a hypocrite. Jesus is calling for a radical reorientation on God himself, Foundry Church. Right? He's pushing us to have a real and utterly authentic relationship, adventure, a forging of a lifelong reliance on God, abundant life to the full, a real life. Not just superficial relationships on this horizontal level. He wants to bring us vertical. Right? If God is not real to you, it will be miserable to endure something difficult with God as the only one who knows. It will all seem very pointless, very inefficient, because the whole range of our horizontal possibilities will be nullified because no one knows what you are experiencing. All the matters is God when we truly fast, and what he thinks of us, and what he's going to do in and through us. You see, we can give up food for a lot of different reasons, can't we? To lose weight, to get into shape. Sometimes people do it for political reasons, like a hunger strike. But fasting, true, real, purposeful, vertical fasting is done solely for God. It's done for that nourishment only he can provide. It must be God-initiated and God-ordained. Richard Foster, in his book, The Celebration of Discipline, which some of you have taken out there at the Resource Center, and we have a few more copies, that goes through all of these different spiritual disciplines we're talking about. He puts it like this. He says, if our fasting is not unto God, we have failed. We have failed. If it's not unto God, we have failed. Physical benefits, success in prayer, the endowing with power, spiritual insights. These must never replace God as the center of our fasting. If our fasting is not that vertical onto God relationship, we have failed. All right, the whole point of fasting, the whole point of this series of sermons, the whole point of everything that we do and are forging our life on in him while guiding others to do the same. The whole point is him, God. Right? God is desperately seeking us. He is fighting for us. He is proud of us. And sometimes, Foundry Church, I get it, we miss it because we are willing to give up everything but the right thing. I will give up an hour on Sunday morning, but only if I'm not tired, and only if my kids don't have something else to do, and only if I don't stay up too late last night. I'll give up my evenings to read the Bible, but only if, again, I'm not too tired, and only if I understand what I'm reading, because I'm going to read it by myself. I don't want to be in community. And only if I like what I'm reading. Well, really, I just don't like to read, so I don't read. You see what I'm saying, right? I will pray for my family, but I'm not praying for that guy or those people. Screw them. We will give something up, but not really what we should be giving up. That is why we, everyday, ordinary Christians, not monks, not prophets, not apostles, need to fast. Because look, right, more than any other discipline, fasting reveals the things that are controlling us. Right? More than anything, fasting reveals the things that are controlling our life. You see, we cover up what is inside of us with food and other things, but in fasting, these kinds of things, they come to the surface. They just have a way of doing that. You want to know how I know this? Have you ever been around me when I'm hungry? Right? Well, you should thank your lucky stars that you aren't, because I'm not a nice person, right? When you look up hangry in the dictionary, there is my picture looking right back at you. At first, after a few hours of a fast, we get a little upset, and we start to blame it on the hunger. But then as we sit in that hunger for a little bit, we think, all right, well, I got this. We start to grow, and we start to pray. And we realize that there is something deeper going on in our lives that God is doing. You see, look at it like this. Fasting is not a painful discipline that we must go through. It is a healing process that we get to go through. That's what it comes down to. It's a healing process that we get to go through, because it's going to shine a light on the things that are holding us down and just making us sick, making us live that stupid horizontal life. Anger, bitterness, jealousy, pain, fear. If these things are within us, controlling us, hurting us, they will be revealed when we fast. So true, Foundry Church. And then they're going to be healed. They're going to be healed. David wrote in Psalm 69, he said, I humble my soul with fasting. Psalms 35. Pride was controlling David, so he fasted, and he was humbled, and he was restored. So sure, fasting, it makes us vulnerable and reminds us of our frailty. Right? It reminds us that if we do not eat, we'll die. But standing before God hungry, suddenly it is clear who we are, Foundry Church. We are people who are poor. We are people who are poor, but called to be rich in a way that the world that we live in, that we are assigned to for this moment, does not understand. We are people who are empty, just empty, tank on zero, but we're called to the fullness of God. Right? When we fast, when we stand hungry and understand that our nourishment, the nourishment that we absolutely desperately need, is not food, but it is God himself for his glory and for his honor alone. When we stand there, we may be people who are hungry, but we're called to taste and to see that the God that we forge our life on more than anything else in this world or in the world to come is good. Is good. For each of us, even us, everyday, ordinary Christians, he says, I'm good. I satisfy. Not the good gifts I give you. Right? I mean, one of my favorite verses in the Bible is where he says, eat and be merry. Right? I love it in the Old Testament when they're like worshiping God. They're like, hey, go get a ram. Let's kill it and let's roast that sucker. Right? Let's feast. That's not what nourishes. Deep down, it's God. not what God can do for me. It's not the good gifts. He's blessed us with family, love, a church community, each other, food, clothing, shelter. Right? He gives us good gifts because he's our Father. He says, why would he give us a snake? He's our Father. He wants to give us good gifts. But those things don't nourish us. They don't sustain us. God does. His glory and his honor. That's available to each of us. So the question, the onion that we wanted to peel was is fasting for me? Right? So if you want to know if fasting is for you, just think, do you have needs? Right? Do you have needs? And maybe God is offering us fasting as a gift to show us how much better he is at meeting our needs. But I don't really need something. I'm just really struggling with unbelief right now. I have some doubts and questions. Well, fasting's for you too, right? We all experience times of questioning whether God will take care of us or whether we believe enough to be a Christian, whatever that means, right? So trying to stir up more belief can be frustrating and it can be unfruitful, but fasting helps us walk out our faith regardless of our feelings. Without a God who answers prayers, fasting makes no sense at all. While fasting, we may think, this is ridiculous, this is stupid, I'm hungry, I'm hangry, right? How could not eating make any difference at all? Right? We could be thinking those things when we have these doubts, and more doubts could creep in. But in fasting, if we keep going, regardless of what we feel, we are saying, I trust you, God. I'm forging my life on you, and I trust you, God, and believe you will answer my prayers during this fast because you established this discipline for your people. Right? The act of fasting is an act of faith, even if we feel like we don't have any faith left. We still might be thinking, man, I don't know, is fasting for me? Well, do you need a breakthrough? Do you need a breakthrough somewhere in your life? Think about Daniel. When Daniel, he saw an interpretation for a vision, for a dream that he had, and he prayed, and he fasted for 3 weeks to figure out what that meant. And at the end of the 3 weeks, he was visited by an angel who brought him the meaning of his dream. As we pray and fast, there's a battle going on for our faith, and we fast. And when we fast, we join that battle. We take up arms. Right? We fight alongside those that God has set us to give us breakthrough. Still, we might be thinking, man, I don't know if fasting is for us. And so let me say this. Do you need more consistency in your faith? Right? Paul tells the Thessalonians to pray without what? Ceasing. Right? When we hear that verse, we should think about fasting. When we fast, we set apart 3 meal times to pray. But throughout the day, when we are hungry and our tummy is rolling and roaring, I added 2 words there. We say, God, I want to eat, but even more, I want you to move. And when we feel weak, we say, God, I am weak. I can't get up, but I trust that you are strong. When fasting, we are constantly aware of our hunger, and we can turn that awareness into awareness of our desperate need for God. And because we live in a world that eats 3 times a day, giving up food for prayer provides automatic consistency in one's prayer life. I'm going to invite the band to come up, and we're going to do one more thing here. So with all those things first, you see that fasting, it is for everyone. Right? It's for everyone. It's for everyone who is homesick for heaven. Right? That's the root. It's for everyone who needs a little bit more faith. It's for everyone who needs a little bit less of this world. You know what I mean? It's for everyone who wants to take the next right step up and to the right.